what does that have to do with making music? How do I know how to do that just by playing that? And that's what we're going to try to connect here in this video today. We're going to start with the major minor scale discussion. If you're a piano player and you're here and you're wondering how scales work or how they work to enhance your improvisation, or how do I use a scale to make me sound like a better improviser. And so let's acknowledge the two kinds of scales that we are generally familiar with. And that's the major scale and the minor scale. So let's just use C. So here we go. C, as we know, are all the white notes on the piano. Now, that's not the rule of thumb when you're saying, what is a scale at the piano? It just so happens that the white notes on the piano are set up to either play a C major scale, okay, and I'm doing this on purpose, I'll show you in a second, or an A minor scale, or a G mixolydian, or an F, or an E, or a D. They're all different kinds of scales when we change the notes that we start and end on in our minds. So let's talk about that. Let's back up. We automatically get a C major scale because we're fulfilling a pattern of the C major scale. And that is first note, 2 whole steps and a half step, 3 whole steps and a half step. And that only works from left to right. And once we have that down, we can do that anywhere on the keyboard. But we're also going to get an A minor scale. C major, A minor. And that's how we're usually taught what we can get with our white notes. And we're given those 2 options. But we actually have 7 options. We have 7 scales. Every time we press the white notes, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Here comes those numbers. Scale tones. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 from left to right before we repeat back to 1. So either we can keep going or we can come back. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Right? So forward is up, backwards is down. Or forward is right, backwards is left. All right? So that gets our orientation. And forgive me if you know all of this stuff, but I'm really trying to back this up so that when I show the new way how we're going to introduce it, hopefully we'll see the value of it, okay? As it pertains to our improvisation and how we're going to think about stuff. So we get those 2 options, but we have 7 options. We've got a scale on C to C. Now I got a scale from D to D. Right? And if I play music based on that, right, we get that sound. How about E to E? Okay, this is kind of a weird sound. We don't usually build things off of this, but you can. Right? We get that sound. Let's do F. Right? So this is an F scale. Let's say it's an F scale in the key of C. All right? So we're using the C major scale, but we're playing F to F. And we can build songs or passages based on this concept. Right? Gives us a really cool flavor, right? And we can keep doing this for all the other ones. So let's just say we have 7 options every time we play a 7-note scale. So how do we practice scales normally as in a piano lesson, in what I call the standard American piano lesson? When I grew up, this is all I can do is my experience and how I taught piano. Before we play our songs or our pieces, we start with playing our scales. And the idea is that we're running through all 12 of our scales for our teacher, right? So, and then if I want to go around the cycle of fifths, I will go to G. Or if I want to go the other way in the cycle of fifths, I'll go to F, and I'll go that direction. And if you notice when I'm playing, these fingers that I'm starting on and the types of movements that I'm making, and you know this already if you know your scales, are different than this one, or this one, or this one. That was wrong. We're having to manage all of that when we're learning our scales, which is what makes it hard, right? The second thing that makes it hard is this. What does that have to do with making music? How do I know how to do that just by playing that? And that's what we're going to try to connect here in this video today. So let's focus in on a scale, on how to interact with it and the things that we can get out of it first, and then I'll explode it later in the third part. C major. Let's place, which you've been watching me do this whole demonstration. Let's place our left and our right hand in a particular fashion at the keyboard for a C major scale. I'm playing in what's called tetrachords. Tetrachord, tetra meaning four, chord meaning, in this case, a group of notes. And when I learned this, when I was taking music theory, it never made sense to me because a chord, to me, didn't feel like four consecutive notes in a scale. I always learned chords as skipping up the scale, right? Play, skip, play, skip, play, skip, play, skip, play, right? And I get a nice big chord by skipping, right? That's how I saw it. And you can rearrange it and it looks, you can get a cool version of that chord, like that, and we won't discuss that yet. But even though I have two consecutive notes, it doesn't look like a cluster, right? And so that was confusing to me. So putting that aside, tetrachord here and a tetrachord here. All I'm doing is splitting up the scale into two parts. And I'm categorizing it in my mind, basically, on how my left hand interfaces with this part of the scale and how my right hand interfaces with this part of the scale. And I get familiar with this, and as we go around the cycle and get familiar with this hand position, then we start to learn things that I can't just sit here and tell you. You're going to learn things on your own as you do it. So notice a couple of different things here. I have, if I go from left to right in my left hand, I've got a pattern of first note, then two whole steps and a half step, okay? And then where my right hand is, I have a first note and two whole steps and a half step. So that's interesting, right? We're starting to recognize that, okay, there's an equilibrium here, there's a balance. There's two sides of the scale and they're the same in function or in structure, right? Okay, so this is what we call our C major scale. What's making it a major scale? It just happens to be the third note of the scale. Number system again. 1, 2, 3. That's called a major third. A major third is described as being 1, 2 whole steps away from the root of our scale. That's as much as I want to say about that, because I want to get back to feeling the piano. So what we'll do is we'll create a pivot tone in the left hand on the third note, and it just so happens to be our third finger, right? So we talk about that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. From the thumbs to the pinkies. 1 to 5. All right? Sometimes they match up, and sometimes they don't. So we're back to the tetrachords. The third finger in my left hand is matched up with the third note of the scale. That I'm going to call a pivot tone, and we can lower that by a half step. And that gives me, no matter what we know already about minor scales, right? This gives me a minor scale. Great. Now forget what you know already, okay? Think of this as the first time that we're discovering this on our own. We know that this is the major third, so no matter what we do in this configuration, I've got a major scale category. Now let's just pivot the third, and now I've got a minor scale category. Forget what you know, forget what you heard, that's just what it is, all right? So let's reserve that pivot tone for the left side or the left hand or the lower part of our major scale. Now let's talk about a couple of pivot tones in the right hand, okay? That's going to be on the third and fourth finger in my right hand. And they are the sixth and seventh tone of the scale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, okay? So we could do the same thing with these. Let's just take this tetrachord. I can pivot the sixth down a half step and get this sound for the upper part of the tetrachord. I can lower the 7 and get this sound at the upper part of my scale. Okay, I can lower both of them and I can get this sound. Okay, so that's the introduction to pivot tones. So historically in piano lessons growing up, and this I would consider to be the standard American piano lesson. Teachers growing up, taking piano lessons, then becoming teachers, then teaching what they learned, right? That's kind of the standard how we filter from generation to generation. And it's kind of ended up where we show up to our piano lesson, and before we open our books to play through our things, we'll either do a finger exercise book or we'll run our finger exercises, which are the scales. So we'll take C major and we'll run it, and we've learned our fingerings, right? We've gone through, okay, what it's a 1, 2, 3, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, and then we do that, and then we figured that out, and now we know how to play it. Okay, and then let's say we'll go to G, and then we'll keep that pattern. Then D, A, and because I don't want to go way up here, I'll come down here and change my octave, A, and so on and so on. Okay, that's our experience on running scales. And when we run our scales, we're generally going to cover 3 kinds of scales if you get far enough. If you ever learn all 12 of your scales, honestly. Sometimes it takes 2, 3 years before a student is playing all 12 of their major scales. And it doesn't have to be that way. So, here's the other 2 scales that we learn. Basically, they're minor scales. This is the way that I like to see how we relate one scale to another, because it's more natural and it uses our body and the instrument as an interface. And that's the benefit of doing these tetrachords, the way I see it. So if I can take my 2 tetrachords and just move down, backward, down to 7, down to 6. Okay, now I'm sitting on A, and that is now our relative minor, or what we'll call the A natural minor. Why would we call it natural? Well, if it was in the forest and we found it, that's how it would be, because it was born out of a C major scale. Let's just think of it like that. Or another way is, I use the white notes to play my major scale because they're in a particular order, and I just crawled down the white notes until I got A's on the outside as my goalposts. And that's my A natural minor scale, okay? It happens to be the 6th chord tone. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, from left to right. So in C, once we go around the cycle, we'll get to a C minor, and it will end up being this pattern. How do I know that? Because I know that C minor, C natural minor, is going to come out of a relative major scale, and that scale is going to be a minor third above that, E flat major. Great. So coming back down, all I did was walk down from E flat, and I landed on C. Okay, and I landed on this C scale, the natural minor. Cool. Then if you get that far in piano lessons, Then your teacher will say, hey, there's a cool new minor scale and it has a really cool sound. And you're going to really like it. It goes like this. Pretty cool, right? That's our harmonic minor scale. What does our harmonic give us? Well, we heard it. We heard what it gives us. But in reality, it takes this pivot tone and it brings it back up, or it moves it up, however you want to think about it from whatever direction you're coming at it at. So takes this tone on my fourth finger, right? On the seventh tone of the C scale, and goes up. And it gives us this cool leading tone. Right? And that's what creates the tension for us so that we can have the resolution. Ta-da, right? Great. So those are the three scales that we would encounter in a typical piano lesson. And that's as far as we go, with really no explanation as to why they exist, how we got there, and how do we even use them, right? And here's another point. When practicing scales like this, they'll say, okay, now play your C. And then you'll go, okay, and we'll give for the first 5 notes, because we know those. Okay, got it. And then they'll do it. So typically every week we'll go to our piano lesson because we didn't practice our scales. We're just playing them in our lesson. So typically we'll go through it and we'll learn how to make that mistake over and over again. And that's how we'll play our minor scales always. All right. So here's why tetrachords are so cool. When I play a C major tetrachord with my left and my right hand, I can play the whole scale at infinite speed, which is at the same time. Okay? At the same time. So how fast can you play your C scale? Instantly? Okay. Now, if I can play this, that means that I knew what it was before I got there. Very important. Improvising musicians see the path before they play the path. We witness it all at once. Even as a musician, I can still watch somebody who's great and just go, oh, that is so cool. Oh, yeah. Oh, they went there. Oh, because that's the power of music. Music is a magic trick and it works every time. So let's focus on what the music offers us. If we can see our path at the same time, and we can see it in all the places on the piano instantly, and that's pretty easy to do because all I have to do is see white keys and know where C's are. Okay? But let's try this on another scale. Can we do it that fast on another scale? Let's go to E flat. Can you see the E flat scale? All of its notes. And can you imagine yourself playing it before you get there and play it all at the same time? This is your first improvisational test, okay? Take this test seriously. This is the difference between somebody who can play their scales and someone who knows their scales. Different, okay? Yeah, all right. So what I've just proven to the world and to myself, I know the E flat major scale because I can sit here and play the whole thing all at once. I see the whole path. Now I can't play it all over. I can't play it on the entire piano at once because I'm only working with 8 fingers at a time. But if I can get from here to here, that's pretty dang fast. Okay, that's pretty accurate, and I've compressed the time from one pattern to another pattern to a pretty small amount. That means I can play my scales pretty dang quickly. So I want to show you the benefit of being able to play your scales like this as an improviser, not as a finger exerciser. So I'm going to play 12 scales. Let's see how long it takes. I'm going to go in order from C, then to F, to B flat, to E flat, to A flat, to D flat, to G flat, F sharp, then to B, E, A, D, G. And then that puts me back to C. So let's do it. How fast can you do it? Like this. C, F, B flat, A flat, A flat, D flat, F sharp, E, A, D, G. And I'm back to C. Okay, now let's just say I can play each one in a second. That's 12 scales in 12 seconds. I can play 12 major scales in 12 seconds. Can I do it with minor scales? Yeah. Can I do it with the different kinds of minor scales? Uh-huh. So that's the benefit of using tetrachords as an improviser at the piano, just to learn the language and the sentences and the words that we're going to utilize to make music. Okay, so we've talked about scales, major scales and minor scales, the typical way that we've learned them, the typical way that we've interfaced with them at the piano, and we've learned a new way to interface by using tetrachords. Why? So that we can prove to ourselves that we know the scale, and not only know it, but we can play it all at the same time. We can see it before we play it. Therefore, we get to make decisions before we do them. And we'll be right most of the time if we have good technical ability and we can actually see the path and we've actually rehearsed those paths. We've discovered pivot tones. And if we think in terms of the pivot tones in our left hand, using the third finger, which happens to be on the third scale tone, right? And then in the right hand, we use the third and fourth finger, which happens to be on the sixth and seventh tone of the scale, and we can pivot those around to get different types of scales. Then we're ready to move on to part 2 of this video, and we're going to use pivot tones to now come up with some really super creative scales now that we know how to find all of them.